Hey friends, Sleepy here, and welcome to a new episode in my discussion series. We're on episode 4 now of consoles, games, collecting. The topic of today's video is going to be about video game magazines. I'll let you guys know why I love to collect them, why I enjoy reading them, why I feel that they were a very important part of gaming, and why they were important for the gaming industry and just my general thoughts about them, why I like collecting them. Of course, we'll talk about their future and what's happened with video game magazines, but they're just something I have really enjoyed over the years, and it's something I love to collect. Of course, you guys know that this discussion is open for you guys. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this topic. Let me know your guys' thoughts on gaming magazines. You guys can let me know in a comment if this is a topic you feel like that maybe you need to talk more about and need to film a video response talking about it. I would appreciate that as well. I just ask if you guys do film a video response, please let me know about it so I can check out your guys' video. Share the link with me so then I can post a link to your video response as a comment though, so that other people who watch this video can find your video and check it out. So I do appreciate everybody who participates in my videos and in these discussions. It's really fun getting to see other people's opinions on stuff, as we all have our own opinions on things. We all view things differently, and it's always fun to have discussions talking about our hobby and the passions and what we're passionate about and what we love. So this discussion is definitely open to you guys, and I always appreciate interacting with you guys. So for me, I just absolutely love video game magazines. They have been a very big part of my life, along with the video games that I own. Gaming magazines have been very important for me, as they help me find out and give me information about new games coming out. Because when I was growing up as a kid, we did not always have access to the internet. It's not like today where the whole world is plugged in, connected, smartphones, tablets, laptops, computers, everything's all connected together. And there's so much information out there that as soon as a new game is released, everyone and their brother knows it. They're sharing it with each other online, and you get to see trailers. And it's just so easy to have access to information, where back when I was growing up in the late 80s and 90s, you know there was no internet around. There's some basic stuff out there, but it wasn't mainstream and out there for everybody. So the only way that you could learn about some of this information was either you saw a commercial on TV, which they did have commercials, but not every single game had commercials out there. You would find out of a game whether somebody, a friend or a buddy, or an acquaintance, somebody, another kid or something, knew about a game and brought you over to their house and showed it to you, you could learn about a game. But one of the big ways that we learned about new consoles coming out, the way we learned about new games, was video game magazines. And there were several different publications out there over the years, and a lot of them have gone by the wayside now, as physical print magazines and newspapers and stuff are kind of going to the wayside, as we are embracing a more digital, always connected future. But we had magazines like Nintendo Power. Nintendo had its own special magazine, all based on their Nintendo products and games. PlayStation had their own magazines. Microsoft, even with their Xbox, had the official Xbox magazine, which actually just ended a couple years ago because of the pandemic. There was Electronic Gaming Monthly, which I really enjoyed. Game Pro, and several other publications. There were also some that were unique to here in the US, and there were some that were worldwide release, and there were also some that were unique to like the European territories and stuff. And so I've always really enjoyed gaming magazines, and I do love collecting old ones, as I still have own a bunch of the ones that I had as a kid, because I used to get subscriptions to them, because you could save it, where if you went to the grocery store or something, it'd be like $3 or $4, maybe $5 for a copy, but you could get a whole year subscription for like 15 or $20, and so it ends up breaking down to like $1 or $2 for an issue. And it was always a fun time every month getting the different game magazines and seeing the stuff they have. And I have a couple down here. I actually do own quite an extensive video game magazine collection, as I have been collecting them now for many years. And one of my big sources for them is a place called Half Price Books. So they're a bookstore that sells books, and they sell movies and DVDs and computer games and toys and plush and magazines and stuff. And a lot of times their magazines are priced at either 50 cents or $1. And sometimes people will turn in entire collections, and I have got a lot of video game magazines over the years from them, thanks to their cheap prices. I even got some of my Star Trek magazines, because there are different Star Trek magazines, and that's another hobby I love. I've got a lot of great stuff, so they have been a really good source for me. eBay, I got a lot of lots on there and individual issues, which you don't get as many deals as you used to, because of course prices have gone up. I've also found some really good deals at my local game stores, as they've had a bunch of gaming magazines over the years. So I've got almost a complete official Xbox magazine collection, as that's one I wanted to go for a complete setup. I actually own all the demo discs, because that was another thing too that I really loved about gaming magazines, is they used to come bundled with little demo discs, and it gave you games you could try out and play that weren't released yet at the time, and give you a little sneak peek at them. And sometimes, the final product was different from the demo. A lot of time too, the demo discs were packed with content, like they might have gameplay videos, they might have tips on it, but sometimes they were also bundled, especially if you got into the 6th generation and then getting into 7th generation, where they kind of stopped after 7th generation, is they had DLC content sometimes for games. And some of those discs contain content that is no longer available through the official Microsoft or Sony networks. So like there's some for Splinter Cell for the original Xbox, where there's downloadable levels that are on one of the demo discs for the Xbox magazine. And unless you know somebody who has that file saved, where you can go onto maybe their website and download it, there's no way to get that content anymore unless it's on the original Xbox. Well, you can pop in that demo disc and download that content for your game, which is really cool. So a great preservation thing. So I got a couple issues down here, like Nintendo Power. Here's one from January of 1999. So this is volume 116, talking about Castlevania has a 10-page monster review. Like, I just enjoyed reading these old magazines and going back, and just the nostalgia of it. Sometimes they came with, like, Nintendo Power came with these really cool posters and fold out maps. I loved that they had in-depth guides to games. They gave you tips and tricks from the pros, especially with like Nintendo Power. The people who made these games, sometimes help contribute tips and tricks for this. Sometimes the people part of the magazine themselves, are big gamers, and they would share their stories. I also love like the reviews when new games would come out. They'd be able to tell you about, hey, this new latest and greatest Donkey Kong Country is coming out, and it's a unique game, and you got to try it out, and here's my review of it, and you get in-depth look at it, because we didn't have internet as a kid, so there wasn't access to it. So if you didn't have a gaming magazine, you might not even know about a game coming out. And that's how a lot of people missed out on different releases over the years, is unless they saw them at the video store, to go rent a game, or you went to the game store, you might have missed out on games, because not every game store obviously had every single game ever released. You just had what that store had access to. So that's where gaming magazines for me were a big part of informing me on when new games are coming out, or when the new console was out. It wasn't like today. You didn't have the big E3s, which, E3's kind of going to the wayside, and I know they canceled it for this year, but this is how you found out about a new console coming out. And they make a big deal, like Nintendo Power, like when the Super Nintendo was coming out, they had a whole special issue at it, or like the 64 or GameCube and other magazines. Whenever there was a new console launch, it was a really fun time. Just amazing. Hey, there's a new console going to be out there, and this is all the specs about it, and this is how it is, and look how much better it is than the current generation you're playing, man. This is next gen, and look at the kind of games you're going to get, and you got previews and stuff for it. I also like these too, is they're like a time capsule. I love going back and reading these old ones, because you will actually see stuff about canceled video games. Like I remember StarCraft Ghost, that was a game that was in development for a long time, kind of in limbo, and it never actually did get released, but there was a lot of coverage about it and stuff. And so there's a lot of stuff preserved in these old magazines of games that have never seen the light of day, or maybe they were only released in Japan, or maybe they were only released in Australia, maybe they were only released in Europe, and we never actually got an American port of it. Or maybe the same thing, maybe somebody in Europe didn't get an American game, and these magazines would have previews and stuff about it. So I've always enjoyed reading them and collecting them, and just experiencing the nostalgia. I also like the smell of these old magazines. They have a certain smell to them. It's kind of like opening up an old book, which I love reading and holding a physical book in my hand. Which, I mean, they do have uh, digital magazines, which there have been people who have been going back and archiving these magazines and like scanning the pages, and you can see them digitally on there, which I think is a great way to preserve them. I know people have done that with like Nintendo Power magazines, like this one, but I prefer to actually own the physical magazine itself. I've always been a guy that's into physical collecting, and having something to hold in your hand. You just can't beat holding an actual magazine or book in your hand and reading through um, the pages and seeing the wonderful artwork and detail in there. You just can't match that with a screen like you can with a physical book or magazine. That's why I like having them. Another one here I got is an official US PlayStation magazine, and this was from March of 2005, which I don't even think the PlayStation magazine's still around. I mean, it might be. I don't think it is, but it just was cool because you got previews, and then you got your reviews in there, and great artwork, talking about racing games and stuff. And then I always did like getting different magazines, the different writers and their opinions on games, because sometimes their opinions differ from mine, and so you could get an average score of what they thought of a game, and to give you an idea of, hey, there's a new game that maybe to check out. This looks cool. Like, here's Nano Breaker. And I discovered a lot of games thanks to gaming magazines that I never knew about because of not having internet. Now, of course, as the internet started to become more dominant, and we first got our internet, I had the dial-up internet, the 56K modem, and make all the noises and stuff. Maybe some of you, younger generation, never experienced dial-up internet, but let me tell you, it was freaking extremely slow. There was not a whole lot of websites and stuff, and you had to be careful when people would call because they could bump you off the internet, and you had to ask permission from your parents so you could go on the internet, because they couldn't use the phone while you were on the internet because they went through the phone lines. It's not like nowadays where they've got internet through cable providers or satellite providers or stuff. It was just pretty primitive at the time, but it was fun and unique at the time, and the websites were real basic and stuff, and seeing the information. But I've always preferred news out of gaming magazines, as like I said, they're just like a time capsule. They're preserved forever in this print format, and you can always go back and reread and experience some. And I've gone through reading some of these old magazines. Sometimes you're sitting on the toilet or whatever, taking a big shit, and you can sit there and read a little magazine for a little bit. I know a lot of people like to get their reading time in sitting on the toilet. I do as well. And they're just something that's been really fun. There is one game magazine I know that's around for sure, that's still going around, that I've been subscribed to for a very long time, and that is a magazine called Game Informer, and this is issue 334 here. Not the greatest thing anymore, as far as, because there's so much detail out there with the internet and stuff that like these aren't really necessary. But I subscribe to this magazine as it's part of my pro membership for GameStop, and they have a digital version of it. But like I said, the only reason I want to get it is, I want to, if I'm going to pay for it, I want an actual physical magazine, not a digital one, because I can get the information for free on the internet. Why would I pay to get it digitally? So as long as they still have a physical one, I'll keep getting it, because it's still nice too, reading through this, because even this will go over games that I don't even know, new games that are out there. I've missed several games over the years, and I also do love times they do some like retro collections of going through old retro magazines, retro gaming. Sometimes I'll talk about old stuff in here as well, and it just packed full of all kinds of articles and stuff, and all the new tech and gadgets that are out there for gaming, and in-depth reviews and stuff. And I really do like these old gaming magazines. Now, there also is a really cool publication that has been around for a few years now called, I think it's Retro Gamer. I actually have a couple issues, and it's all about going back and talking about old retro games and stuff, like they did with these old Nintendo Powers, as example, or Game Pro and stuff. Just something I really have just had a huge passion for, and just love reading these old magazines. And it's really cool that they are still making magazines today. Of course, Kind of like how strategy guides have gone to the wayside and there's very few made these days. It's the same thing with video game magazines, as with us having access to the internet and the younger generations not really into physical media collecting. They just don't have a need to grab a magazine anymore to learn about a game, because they can just go online or go on their phone even, and in 5 seconds they got all the information they want. They go on YouTube and watch videos. They can go onto GameSpot or IGN, and they can get all the information that they want. You can even go on Game Informer's website and get the digital copy of the magazine. Go on there and get all the information that you need about games. But for me, I still like my physical stuff and collecting, and so I still enjoy reading these Game Informer issues every month as they do come in, as if they're really fun. I mean, if I were to buy these old magazines like these, like the Game Informer one, I think they're normally like $6 or something an issue, but I think it's like $20 a year, 15 or 20, something like that, and you can get the whole year of issues. So it breaks down to just a couple dollars an issue. So I've continuing to work on collecting retro game magazines, as there's something I really enjoy. Of course, I don't want to pay too much for them. There's some that are really special. Like I might pay a little bit more for an issue of it, like Nintendo Power, because there's a couple ones like Nintendo Power. I'm going for a complete Nintendo Power magazine collection. I have about 100 issues left to get, but it's not a goal that I'm going to be upset if I wasn't to complete. And then anytime I'm out at retro game stores or half price books or something, I'll pick up cheap copies of gaming magazines, and if I don't have it, I add it to my collection. If I do get extras and doubles, I have a collection of doubles and stuff that I put in a trade box that I trade to others, because I do have friends and buddies who are also after collecting magazines, and we're able to trade issues with each other, or I can sell them some of the issues that I find for someone who's looking to complete their sets. So if I can get them cheap, I'll pick them up so I can help somebody else out with getting an issue. Like anytime I find Nintendo Powers for 50 cents, they're definitely worth picking up, because you go on to like eBay these days and they're really expensive. Like I remember back in 2020, like literally the week before the pandemic hit hard and we started locking down and stuff, I found a big giant collection of Nintendo Power magazines, and they had some of the old ones, and I didn't even know in the middle, because I was just looking. I was like, oh well, look, there's so many I don't have. Oh yeah, for the price I gotta buy it. And in the very middle of it was the very first issue of Nintendo Power, which now is going for big bucks, commanding big dollars on eBay, especially if it's in really good condition like mine is. And it was just awesome. Like I'd always wanted that original issue, but I never was able to find it as a kid. And I got really lucky at that game store and found it. And so it's just something that's really special for me. Gaming magazines have been a big part of my life, and they always will be. They're a great companion piece to my collection, and they're just fun to take the time and read through them and learn about games and stuff. Like I do have an issue, I can't remember what magazine it is, but there was talk about how Halo was going to release for the PlayStation 2, which is crazy. At one time, Bungie, before Microsoft acquired them, and after it was going from a PC game to a console game, I actually have an issue. I remember reading an interesting article where it talked about it coming to PlayStation 2. Like, I've never seen any other information about it ever since that gaming magazine, which I would love to find out what issue it was in. But it's just cool, talking about Halo being on PlayStation. Guys, could you imagine if Sony got to have Halo instead of Microsoft? They wouldn't even be around. The Halo is what made the original Xbox at least relevant, and made it somewhat popular, and made it so that we have the Xbox consoles we have today. But could you imagine if Halo was actually on PlayStation 2, like that magazine was talking about? Like, going to completely change the industry. So I've always enjoyed these gaming magazines. They're just been a big part of my life, and they're just fun to read through. I still read through them now. That's why I like going back and just reading about old games, a simpler time. And like I said, even with the Game Pro, reading about the new stuff, it's just fun to learn about these games. I love getting the tips. I love getting the tricks, because they'd have walkthroughs for these games. So basically, like kind of like mini strategy guides in these magazines, and it was a great way to get the tips and tricks. You also had a chance where you could buy merchandise and stuff, like Nintendo Power had, where you could get t-shirts and you could get soundtracks, and you could send away for free merchandise for being a subscriber. And it was just as always a fun time, especially as a child. Like every month, my parents let me subscribe to a few different magazines. It was always fun every month getting the different magazines in and going through and reading. I was just loving it. As soon as it came in, like, oh yeah, I got that new issue, man. I got to read it and see, like, oh, there's this Rampage World Tour Blitz. so cool. There's this game called Silent Hill. There's, just whatever new game was out at the time was always cool because you just never knew what you were going to learn about. And then, it was really a fun time, especially when a new console was coming out and got you all hyped up. And like, like when Nintendo 64 was coming out and I first saw Mario 64, just blew my mind. I'm like, holy shit, we have 3D graphics now and 3D polygons that look amazing. Like I remember when Dreamcast came out and like the graphics I was like at the time are like, oh man, they look realistic. It's almost like real life. And of course, now you go back and they look pretty primitive, but at the time, man, they were mind blowing. So it's just been fun growing up and evolving with gaming and stuff. And gaming magazines have just been a very big part of my life, and they have been a very important part of gaming. We wouldn't have the coverage, we wouldn't have the interest in gaming if it wasn't for the gaming magazines and those men and women who took the time to share their passion with us by writing articles and creating these magazines for our enjoyment. They really have helped video games progress. Of course, now that we're into a more digital future, magazines aren't really an important part anymore, but they did play an important part at one time, and they have helped the industry, and that's why I love collecting retro game magazines. Now, of course, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you guys like collecting retro game magazines? Is that something you used to collect? Maybe you don't like collecting anymore, because I do know, a lot of these magazines, they do take up space. Anytime you have a bunch of physical stuff, they take up space. Maybe you're more into getting your information online, or maybe you like downloading the digital copies of magazines where people have scanned them on there and you can just read them on your tablet at your leisure. But I'd like to know your guys' thoughts, your guys' opinions on retro gaming magazines. If you guys want to leave a comment, feel free. I always enjoy reading your guys' comments, discussing topics. If this is one that you feel like maybe I need to film a video response because you have a lot to talk about, I feel free to film a video response. Just let me know about the video so I can check it out, and then I will share a link as a comment to your video so others can find it on this video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Take care. You guys have an amazing day, and Sleepy will see ya next time.